Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Lynn Stevens with the Ohio Grandparent Kinship Coalition. I'm one of the co-presidents. I, along with Miss Brenda, oh my goodness, that's me. She's on the screen. Brenda Dewberry is the our co-presidents for the coalition. Excuse me. We have our vice president, Siobhan Jones. She'll be joining us maybe here, and Barb Turpin, our longtime member, former co-secretary. She does all things related to the coalition. And see, our other secretary, Miss Jones, Donna Jones, our co-secretary working with Barb Turpin. So we welcome you here today. Oh, and Mr. Ron Browder, our board president. We welcome you here today to attend our webinar. Before we get started, we'd like to ask the caregivers to put your name and email in the chat if you would like to be in a drawing for a $50 gift card. So again, if you're interested and you are a caregiver in a $50 gift card, please put your name and email in the chat. Our next meeting will be February 5th, 2025, and that topic is going to be fetal alcohol syndrome spectrum disorder. For today, our training is going to be children's SSI training. And this training is designed to educate advocates, people with disabilities, and caretakers/guardians about the children's SSI program. It'll cover the nuts and bolts of the children's SSI program, including medical listings and the functional equivalent process. And it'll cover the appeals process as well. Our presenter today is Ms. Rebecca Steinhauser from Advocates for Basic Legal Equality. Ms. Steinhauser is a 1996 graduate of the University of Dayton School of Law. She started her law career with the AmeriCorps attorney as an AmeriCorps attorney at Able, and she specialized in housing issues. In 1999, she was hired as a full-time staff attorney at Legal Services of Northwest Ohio, specializing in public benefits, public planning, and elder law. She has been the attorney for healthcare and public benefits at ABLE since July 2013. And she's also been supervising the Medical Legal Partnership for Children since 2021. Over the past 20 years, she's done numerous trainings and presentations in the areas of public benefits and elder law. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Eisenhower and her team. We thank you for being here, and we look forward to your information you're going to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Lynette, for the nice introduction. And I apologize for the technological issues. We had some little issues this morning, typical for a Monday morning, but thank you for your patience, and we'll get started with no delay. So childhood disability benefits. The children's SSI program has been around for about 50 years now. And we find that it's helpful because the clients that we see are typically at poverty level. And they're at poverty level, and if they have children who have disabilities, there are additional challenges that go along with that. So the SSI program has been helpful. It can provide an additional cash supplement on a monthly basis. Because people that have children with disabilities are always going to incur additional costs, sometimes for educational, often for equipment and other things. And we know that there's a link between poverty and poor health. Stats show that people that have a higher socioeconomic status simply have better health outcomes. At the Medical Legal Partnership, we focus on improving the social determinants of health by focusing on clients' legal issues. We can go to the next page, Jim. So poor health causes poverty. So when people have medical conditions and it's just difficult to work, it's to maintain employment, to maintain housing, and that can lead to further health issues and poverty. So next slide. There are many different factors. I mentioned the social determinants of health that go into impacting health, and that can be your access to education, your access to a healthy and stable home, your access to clean, safe housing, your access to food, enough food and nutritious food, your access to health care, and your access to income. So next slide. So the Children's SSI program gives a payment to individuals. It could be an adult or it could be a child. We're focusing on kids today. So kids are defined as kids under age 18 with a disability. And the trick is you also have to have limited income and resources. So limited income is quite limited. So it's a little bit different with kids as opposed to adults. They have some more deductions and things you can use for children as opposed to adults, but the amount of SSI is capped at only $967 a month. So it's not a program that's going to make you rich. So it's a minimum monthly check. It goes, as I said, to either children, low income, aged people, people with disabilities. The resource limit is $2,000 for a child who's living with one parent, $3,000 for a child living with two parents. Should say there are efforts out there to try to increase the amount, the resource limit of the SSI program. They have not increased the amount as of yet, but the amount has not changed since I was in high school. So I think it's been 1984 since it actually changed. So, and your benefit amount can actually vary depending on your living situation as well. So the purpose of the Childhood SSI program, so it's to assure a minimum level of income for kids who are blind or who have disabilities, helps to maintain their standard of living. And as I mentioned, most kids with disabilities may require some additional supports and supervision, and having this additional income helps. We have clients whose parents, it's difficult for them to maintain employment because their children may need round-the-clock care. They're running them to doctor's appointments all the time. So this does help out if you can get access to this program. So next slide. The definition of disability, very different for kids as opposed to adults. I won't get into the adult portion, but one of the things that the adult program focuses on is your ability to work. Since children don't have any obligation to work, Social Security doesn't look at that when they're looking at the process. So what they're looking at is, do you have a physical or mental impairment or a combination of impairments that cause functional limitations or can be expected to be so severe it could cause death. It has to last for at least 12 months. Next slide. I should have mentioned they don't require you to work. Work is not a main portion of the program, but they do look at whether a child has income. So if a child has income, so let me give you an example. If we had a child with a disability, but they were a child actor and they had what they call substantial gainful activity, which is a dollar amount. In 2025, it's $1,620 a month. But if that child had more than that amount of money, they're not going to qualify for the program. So, but normally kids don't work. The kids we see don't have income, so it's not really usually a big issue. So that is the first step of the process. The second step is, do they have an impairment that's severe? So severe, normally everybody's going to get through this step. A severe impairment is just an impairment that impacts your ability to engage in activities. So, if you have arthritis and it impacts your ability to walk or it impacts your ability to lift, that's going to be a severe impairment. So we don't normally have a problem getting through that step. The third step is the impairment must meet a listing, or the impairment must medically equal a listing or functionally equal a listing. So you may be asking, well, what do they mean by that? Well, the medical listings are just sets of rules, and you can find them if you're interested on the Social Security website. If you just tap into the search bar Blue Book, it'll bring up the medical listings for 14 different categories. And so it could be orthopedic, neurological, hematological, mental health. So all of those categories have their own listings. And you can look and see, you have to be very severe to meet a listing. Frankly, most of our clients don't. They're not severe enough to meet those listings, or they'd be the folks that got immediately onto benefits. We probably wouldn't see them coming through our doors. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to qualify for benefits. It's just there's a different process. So if a child or an adult doesn't meet a listing, they're going to look at, for kids, what they call functional equivalence. So we can go to the next slide, Jim. Okay, so what they do is they have several different categories of functioning. There are 6 different functional categories, and a child's functioning, you're going to look at the categories and see if they are impaired, either extremely impaired in one category, or at least what is what they call markedly impaired in 2 other categories. So when you're looking at that, you're going to look at how does a child function compared to a typical child of her age. So if a typical child of that child's age is, let me give you an example, a 10-year-old. A 10-year-old should be potty trained. A 10-year-old should be able to be left in a room for 10 minutes alone without supervision. But if you have a child that isn't potty trained or can't be left alone for 10 minutes, well, then maybe you have some functional issues somewhere that you need to look at. So you're going to look at, Social Security looks at all the combined effects of your impairments. They're also going to look at any extra help that you might need from caregivers or things like structured settings. So sometimes a child does well, but it's does well considering the types of setting she's in. So maybe she's in a very structured setting. She's in a very small classroom where she gets assistance from an aide in the classroom, or all distractions. She has a private area where she can go to be away from distraction. So even if she's performing well in that setting, they are considering the fact that this isn't your typical setting. This isn't a child in a classroom full of 30 kids. So that is very important way to look at things, and Social Security does take that into consideration. They will look at information from not only educators, but doctors and from parents. So they're looking at all those types of evidence. So the functional equivalence categories, there are different categories. I'm going to go to the next slide, Jim. So you can see the categories here. It's acquiring and using information, attending and completing tasks, interacting and relating with others, moving around and manipulating objects, caring for yourself, and general health and physical well-being. Next slide. So as I mentioned, you have to have an extreme limitation in one of the functional domains or a marked limitation in 2 of the domains. So they define marked as 2 standard deviations below the mean, which sounds very statistical and very formal. Basically, though, what they're looking at is how does a child function when they compare with other kids their age? Doesn't mean they can't function at all, but it just means that child's maybe not functioning very well, or like a child of their age should. So you're going to look at when you're going to look at acquiring and using information. I think of where my godchild was when she was 3 or 4, and she was smart and quick. She could certainly rhyme words, point out colors, ask questions in sentences. If you have a child that's not able to do that, it might indicate that has some issues with this functional category, acquiring and using information. Attending and completing tasks. So this is very age specific. We know when a child's 2 years old, they might not be able to focus on things for very long. That doesn't mean they have a functional issue. We have to be careful to rate them according to the age they are. So when a child's getting a little bit older, they're 7 or 8, they should be able to function on a fun activity like watching a show they like or playing a game for a while. So again, it's all very relative to the age of the child, how they should be functioning. So interacting and relating with others. At certain ages, the child should be able to develop relationships, friendships with other kids. They should be able to speak clearly enough to speak to and converse with others. They should be capable of showing affection to caregivers or others. Next slide. So at a certain age, a child should be able to walk or run easily, climb stairs, use zippers or other fasteners, put on their shoes and clothes. And one that we look at, and one that I'm looking at now, I have a children's SSI case. That child's a little bit older. She's a teenager, but she's frequently absent from school. And that's because she has seizures, she has panic attacks. So she's often absent from school, an average of 1 or 2 days a week. So that's definitely not typical of most kids that age. You're also going to look at, do they have physical limitations that are related to treatment? So that child that I'm helping right now, she's on a lot of medications. So the medications make her sleepy. So she's frequently tired. She doesn't have as much energy as a typical child that age. She has a lot of therapy and doctor appointments. So all of these may be indicative of a limitation in this functional category. Caring for yourself. So this has some overlap with some other categories, but at certain ages, some children or most children should be able to put on their shoes and clothes, understand what's safe. So by a certain age, a child should know that it's not safe to run into the street or to touch a hot stove. So if it looks like children don't understand those safety issues, then they may have a functional problem in this category. Again, these can be very subjective. The judge is sort of looking at every child situation differently to determine whether they have a functional limitation. Sometimes we need to have a medical expert come in. So I had a case a couple months ago where the child had some extreme inflammatory bowel issues. She would have accidents at school. She would have a lot of abdominal pain. She would miss school. So the judge still wasn't very comfortable making the decision himself. So he sent out what we call interrogatories to a medical expert, and she answered those questions. And after the questions were answered, The expert basically said, yes, this would cause extreme impairment for this child. So we have an example here, and Avery's a 7-year-old boy who has autism and anxiety. He has trouble developing friendships with other kids. He prefers being alone. He has frequent behavioral issues at school. He's been disciplined for hitting or distracting other kids. He has to be supervised at all times, or he'll run in the street or engage in other unsafe activities. And he gets assistance from a one-on-one aide at school, and he spends a portion of his day in a special ed classroom. Does anybody want to guess as to whether you think he has limitations in any of the functional domains? So I'm not hearing anything, but yes, he definitely would have, I would argue that he has some issues in the functional categories. So he's at least got an issue in the attending and concentrating issue, certainly with interacting and relating with others. It looks like he's having trouble learning and is in a special education classroom. So he certainly has an issue with acquiring and using information. So I would make an argument if I was representing this child that he has functional limitations in at least 3 categories. Next slide. And I should say these are all based on my own cases. So Ava is an 11-year-old girl with sickle cell anemia. She has frequent illnesses and hospitalizations, often must be homeschooled to prevent exposure to viruses. She's falling behind in her schoolwork and might not be able to advance to 6th grade. Does she have limitations in any domain of functioning? And yeah, she definitely does. So you see that she's frequently being hospitalized. So I would make an argument that there's an extreme limitation in that health and well-being category. And then that's falling over into her schoolwork. So it's causing her to have a problem with acquiring and using information. So I think we could, and this is based on one of my cases with an 11-year-old child, and we were able to get that child on benefits because the child was so frequently ill and in the hospital. The child was falling behind on schoolwork. Next slide. So if you apply for benefits, what often happens at the local field office level is they are not considering all the information that a judge will consider. You're not yet in front of a judge at that level. You just have people in a hearing unit in Columbus that are looking at the cases. You often will get denials. Doesn't mean your case isn't a good case. It just means you need to make sure to appeal so that you can get in front of a judge. There is a 60-day deadline for filing appeals. Sometimes people ask for our help and I look at their notice and it looks like they received the notice 4 months ago. And unfortunately, by that time, the appeal deadline has ended and you'll have to start again. Although if there's a good reason for missing that appeal deadline, you can file late and ask for a good cause exception. So an example would be, let's say you were in the hospital when the letter came out and you didn't get out of the hospital for 4 weeks. You got out, you saw your mail, and lo and behold, you'd missed that appeal deadline. So that might be a reason you could ask for a good cause exception. So they will allow you to file late. So we have done this for people and have received permission to file late. So there are 4 different levels of appeal. So your initial denial, if you get denied, you're going to file what's called a reconsideration. If you get denied on that, you are going to appeal to the administrative law judge. That's when you get in front of the judge. That's where we have most of our success. If you don't get a favorable decision from the judge, there is a level of paper review that you can appeal to the Appeals Council. That's a body in Virginia that reviews the case. It can take a really long time to review. Frankly, they rubber stamp most cases. Some, though, do get referred back for a hearing in front of the same judge because the appeals council says, oh, you missed something here that was important, so we're not going to rubber stamp this. This client gets another hearing. If that doesn't do any good, the last stop is federal court, and that takes a really long time. So that can often take up to 5 years to get in front of a federal court judge. So next slide. There are also, if any of you are caregivers for children who are receiving SSI, you may have run into a continuing disability review. So this doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. Everybody that gets on SSI gets set for a review date. That review date may vary depending on what the condition is. So it can be anywhere from 6 months to 7 years. So let's say the condition is something that could change. So you've been in a car accident, you have some broken bones and some other things that you're rehabbing for, but it may be a long process. So they might set you for a shorter review date to check in and see if you have improved. If you were born with spina bifida and you've been using a wheelchair since you were 3 years old and there's no potential of you improving, they may set you for a 7-year review date because that's not going to change. But other things could happen. You know, your health could improve in other ways, or there could be financial things that going on. So they do periodically review cases. It's just very important to fill out and return that paperwork. If you don't return the paperwork, they're going to automatically propose you for termination. So that's very important. At age 18, every child's eligibility is reviewed, and they're reviewed under the adult standards because they're no longer a child. They need to see whether they meet the standards under the adult program. Now, the process doesn't start usually immediately when they turn 18. Social Security can be a little bit slow, so you may actually not receive paperwork until they're almost 19. So, but they will catch up to you at some point, and they're going to look at that case and see, does this child meet the adult standards? And sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So that process, next slide. When they're looking at whether a child is medically improved, they're gonna look at what was the reason the child was put on benefits. And one issue that I see frequently that children sometimes outgrow or improve on are speech issues. So a lot of times we'll see a child who they're not speaking as well, or her speech is not understood as well as it should be when they're 2 or 3. They're in speech therapy. And then lo and behold, 7 or 8, they've improved. If that's the only reason that they were on benefits, they may be terminated from benefits because that's improved. But often that's not the only reason they're on benefits. That may be the chief reason they were awarded benefits, but there's often something else going on. So if Social Security says, well, this is medically improved, we're taking the child off benefits, what we often do is come in and say, wait a minute, this child has these issues and they didn't really get detected until they started kindergarten. So can you look at how they're functioning in the classroom, how they're functioning around their classmates, their teachers? So they have to look at any other medical conditions and explore those before they're going to say this child is completely improved. If they determine there's been no medical improvement, they're going to say, okay, fine, child's still disabled and they've been entitled to benefits. But if they decide there's been improvement, then they next need to go to that next step. And then they look at what the child's condition was back when they were originally approved. Does it still meet listings or does it still meet functional? If not, then they're going to look at, okay, well, is there anything else going on? Any other reason that the child would be entitled to benefits? If they get all the way to the end and they say, okay, we think this child's improved, they're not entitled to benefits, you still have the right to appeal, and should. And it's very important to file right away so you can request continuing benefits. If you don't request continuing benefits in time, those will stop. And it takes a while to get in front of a judge on these hearings. So the continuing disability benefit hearings tend to take longer to come to hearing than the initial benefits. So you may be waiting a year and a half, sometimes even 2 years to get to a hearing. So it's very important to request that your benefits continue while you're waiting for that hearing. So make sure you file for that hearing, and you'll get in front of a judge where, again, you can present evidence of that child's medical improvement. But this is just, in a nutshell, the Children's SSI program. Did anybody have questions about anything specific that I discussed?
One question, Rebecca. If you get a determination and you are trying to appeal it and you said, ask for continuing benefits, what happens if you, at the end, when the determination is made that the child should not have been getting those benefits, does the family then owe that back to SSI?
That is an excellent question. I'm glad you asked that because I did not address that, and I should have. So yes, you are technically, if you appealed, requested continuing benefits, and they ultimately decide this child's not eligible, they may say you owe these benefits, but there's a little clause that if you made the appeal in good faith, they may not pursue those benefits. And honestly, what happens is once you're off the program, they don't have anything to pursue. Like they don't have any money from you to withhold. So I typically don't see Social Security pursuing these benefits, even though we always tell you, yes, we can pursue the benefits. Most of our clients don't have great options. They can't wait a year and a half, 2 years without access to income. So most clients do end up requesting those continuing benefits. So I'm seeing a question in the chat. Is it better to just get a lawyer to file for you instead of trying to do it yourself? Definitely yes. The Social Security system is complex. Let me tell you, I've been practicing Social Security law for almost 26 years now, and it's really complex. It's frustrating for me to navigate sometimes, and I have a lot of experience doing so. So it's definitely to your advantage to have an attorney in your corner who knows the system, who can deal with the frustrations, hand it off to them, let them handle it, let them handle the hearing for you and make the arguments. You're always better off with an attorney. That being said, there are probably fewer attorneys out there that actually take children's cases. They are, to me, more complex than the adult cases. They're difficult. So a lot of the people who do the adult cases don't also do the child cases, so it may be more challenging to find somebody to represent you. At the Medical Legal Partnership for Children, we have locations. I don't know if you all are all in the Southern Ohio area or if you're around the state, but we have locations. Now we have a rural location for people who have been impacted by substance abuse only, but our other two locations, we have locations in Toledo and in Dayton. And so we can provide assistance for kids when they are referred by our partners or by medical providers. So you're definitely better off having an attorney. Second question in the chat, my granddaughter qualifies for Medicaid based on her having zero income versus it based on my income for the purposes of resource limit. Are they looking at grandparent income because I have custody, or the child's income as she has none? So they do look at, there may be some exceptions if you're under the kinship care, but they're generally looking at, generally if you have a lot of income, child's probably not going to qualify for SSI. But like I said, there's a lot more leeway with the children's program than what there is with the adults. It's hard to explain what the income limits are because they have this very complex way that they handle deductions and things. So it's easier to just honestly give your income to Social Security. They'll do the calculations. As a person who's not the parent, just the person who's a caregiver, they are going to need proof that you have custody. I see that somebody's from Parma, Ohio. So I will tell you that we have connections throughout the state. There are medical legal partnerships throughout the state. Parma, Ohio would be under the auspices of Cleveland Legal Aid. So they do have a medical legal partnership at Cleveland. Every MLPC concentrates on different areas. So I think probably most of them do handle children's SSI cases. And then they all work with different medical providers, and we take referrals through the medical providers. There may be some legal aids that also just take kids' SSI cases through their regular program outside of the medical legal partnership. So definitely, though, helpful to have an attorney for these cases. And if worst case scenario, you don't have access to an attorney, you do have the right to see the file. So once it gets to the hearing office, I think they will give it to you on a CD with a special password so you can look and see what the judge has. I will tell you, Social Security doesn't always do the greatest job updating things. So you're going to want to check and see what they have and what needs to be updated so you can tell them what to update. So just looking at the file this morning, and hearings coming up next week. It's only updated through the end of March of last year. So that tells me I need to get records over to them quickly to show them that, yeah, we've had some different things happen since that time. So it's important to look at the records, see what they say, review everything. You have the right to, if your child's very young, they're not going to have them testify. They're going to have you testify. But it depends on the judge. I've had the judge interview kids that were as young as 9 or 10 years old sometimes. It just really kind of depends. So it's always important to think of all the evidence that you think is important to the case and make sure the judge knows about that. They're considering evidence from you as the caretaker, what your observations are. They're looking at what are the doctors observing, what are the school teachers observing. So all of that is very important. And you want to make sure that all of it gets into the record so the judge has a complete snapshot of the case. I don't see any other
I had a
questions.
question. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
It was very interesting to me, both how broad it is in terms of being qualifying, and yet how difficult it is to apply if you don't have an attorney. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
my question is this: um, if someone had if someone had severe ADD, attention deficit disorder, is that something that could potentially qualify?
It could, because they're looking at how it impacts the child's functioning. So I know with the kids that I deal with that have ADHD, and I have to say most of the kids that come through my doors do, um, that's impacting their ability to acquire and use information in that functional category. That's impacting their ability to attend and concentrate on tasks. Sometimes it's impacting their ability to interact with other people. So it's all, each person is their own case. And I think it's very important when you've got ADHD to talk to the teachers. Unfortunately, what I often see is the kids are often medicated. They go to school, maybe they're doing okay when they're on those meds, and then 3 o'clock, bam, that medication wears off and they're bouncing off the walls. And that's when mom and dad see the child. And so often I think the judge isn't really appreciating enough, in my viewpoint, how that child's interacting in their home environment, because they want the objective picture. They want to see, what is the teacher seeing. Now some kids are so severe that even with the medication they're still kind of having issues. So it's all a matter of looking at a functional equivalence. How does whatever that condition is, how does it impact their ability to function in school and in their everyday life? And I should have said, most of you, as long as you don't have problems with reading and writing, should be able to at least apply. There's an application process that you can start online, but with SSI, they do need to take it a little bit further. So you can't completely apply online because they need financial information to make sure you qualify. But it's just a lot of tedious paperwork. So there's one section that's about 24 pages. I always tell people, if you're getting ready to apply, make sure you have some things ready. And you want to make sure that you have the names and addresses and contact information for all of the doctors, that you have dates where the child's had medical treatment, that you have the names and dosages of the medications and what they're taking it for and how it impacts them. You're going to want to have their school. Where did they attend school? What dates? So just have all of that information ready, because they're going to want that and it'll make the application quicker. Worst case scenario, you have trouble reading or writing, or you just are not very tech savvy and you need help. The Social Security office will set an appointment with you. They're now taking all appointments, so they're not doing many walk-in appointments anymore, but if you call your local office, they will schedule you for an appointment. The appointment can be by telephone or you can go in, it's whatever you choose, but they will help walk you through that application. So a lot of people I know have found that helpful. We, for the most part, don't do the applications for people. I do some exceptions when I can see somebody's clearly having problems reading and writing, or they're just not very tech savvy. Not that I'm particularly tech savvy, but my assistant and I will help them do an initial application. But yeah, it is a lot of paperwork involved. So you want to set aside a lot of time. I would say set aside a good 3 hours to do the application. And you can save it and return to the application. But it's just, it's time consuming. Any other questions?
There was one question about whether or not the slides will be available. So typically after these sessions, Rebecca, we also put the slides up on the Grandparent Kinship Coalition
Sure.
website. So, when you'll be sharing those with us, and then we can put them up, and then families can access them.
Yes. What would be the easiest way? Can we
Send it
share
to
them?
send it to Barbara
Send it to
Turpin.
Barb. Okay. I'll send them to Barb. Yes. So those will be available.
Thank you.
And if people have any questions, they are welcome to reach out by email to me if you would like, and I'm happy to address your questions.
I was going to ask a question.
Yeah.
I adopted my grandson June 24th of
Okay.
24. And,
Okay.
and I'm no longer receiving child support.
Okay.
But the income is not increased yet. They sent me a letter and then they haven't responded. I'm getting ready to send them another letter today, I guess, for appeal for the December 1st for the January increase. But it's been 6 months and still.
So was the child receiving SSI benefits?
He was, yes, he's been
Okay.
receiving SSI since he's
Okay.
3. He's 9 now.
Okay.
We have appeals. When I sent them the paperwork for the adoption, they sent me a letter instead of just even responded to that. They sent me a letter saying, well, he may not be disabled, like you were talking about.
Yes.
So I sent them his IEP and everything I had from the doctor and his diagnosis stuff for Cincinnati Children's. And I guess they agreed that he was still disabled because they continued to pay his SSI check, but it hasn't went. It's from 588 to the 900 and whatever it is, but it's still at 588.
Okay. It's still at 588.
Like I'm still getting child support.
Okay. And why did the child support stop?
Because of the adoption.
Oh, you adopted. Okay. Yeah, those, oh my goodness. Did you provide written proof of the issue of the
adoption?
Of the adoption and the stopping of the child support?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I even sent them, there's so much, I don't know how much time goes by where the parents' rights are taken away. So they send a paper for each parent.
Okay.
And then I also provided them each month of no child support.
Okay. And what, can I ask what Social Security, what area of the state you're in?
I'm actually in Middletown, Ohio would be, or Franklin, I guess. Franklin is what,
Okay. All right. And I don't know what your income is or whether you've contacted Columbus. That would be under the Columbus Legal Aid, whether you've contacted them. I mean, this shouldn't be an issue where you have to contact legal aid. It seems so simple, but the problem is the Social Security offices are extremely short-staffed. You can't half the time get through the phone lines, and unless you have their secret numbers, now they don't even want you to walk into the office. So it can be extremely challenging trying to access somebody to say, look, can you just make this change? Even when it's something super simple like you've got going on here, like child's adopted, there's no more child support, increase this SSI. The good thing is, once it gets established, they will go back and they should pay you that back retroactive money.
That's what I was thinking, but I'm going to go ahead and write him a letter today. If I follow the pattern, they're about 90 days out. But the
Okay.
first letter may have stopped it because they said he was no longer disabled. So that took kind of like 90
Okay.
days. But if I follow that pattern, I guess they should review around January 28th. So, but I'm still going to write him a letter because, like you said, if you don't write a letter of appeal, I mean,
Yeah. Tangi,
yes.
Joe Warden here, Dayton office. Also, what you might want to think about, and I don't know if they're going to do this or not. I've seen it sometimes where the Child Support Enforcement Agency, whoever was collecting that child support, will send out that notice of the termination of child support. That actually could be helpful here for you. I mean, you and I all know that once you adopt, that child support is going to adopt, but sometimes I think for Social Security, them actually seeing it in writing that that child support has been terminated, that's going to carry a lot of weight.
I did send that to them.
Okay.
And then after that,
then.
I got a letter saying that I had so long to appeal or something from child support. And then later after that, they sent me a paper saying that the parents' rights have been terminated. So I also gave them that.
Good.
Okay.
Good. Okay,
So
great.
yeah, because you do want to make sure they have all of those things. It sounds to me like it's the typical administrative nonsense that goes on at Social Security. And sometimes you just have to keep calling. You have to, depending on your income, Tangi, you may want to contact Columbus Legal Aid and see if there's somebody that can help you. Because sometimes, like when we step in, you know, we can often step in and immediately get something to happen because we know somebody in the office, but that's not necessarily the case. I wish I knew somebody in Franklin County, but I don't practice in Franklin County. But certainly my colleagues at Columbus Legal Aid would have those connections and would probably be able to resolve that for you. So most legal aids, our income limit is going to be 200% poverty or below. So I don't know what your income is, but if you're over that income limit, I would recommend keep calling, keep following up. And when they do finally get it resolved, like I said, you should get that retroactive payment of those benefits.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, best of luck.
Thanks.
Are there any more questions or concerns for Ms. Rebecca? Okay. Well, Rebecca, we want to thank you for providing an informative session designed to educate our caregivers on Social Security and helping them to understand the various processes that they can use. We look forward to seeing everyone next month on February the 5th. And remember that it will be a Wednesday, and we're going to talk about fetal alcohol syndrome, a very, very powerful presentation. And we hope that you'll be able to join us. Thank you all and have a great day. Ron,
Thanks,
did you
everybody.
have anything to add?
No, just that Mrs. Monica Bauer is going to be the recipient of the $50 gift card this month. And so congratulations to her. And
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I think I might have cracked my tooth when my jaw hit my desk when I saw that.
So Barbara will be in touch with you and she will get it to you, okay?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I have a quick question. If someone doesn't mind answering it, it's not on the presentation.
Oh, okay.
I was part of the Zoom call last month with Santa Claus. And do I just send a thank you card to the address